The old woman woke up before sunrise every day. Her body was slow, her joints stiff, but her mind was clear. She had learned long ago that the morning decided whether she would eat well or go to bed hungry. She lived in a small rented room with cracked walls and a tin roof that rattled when the wind passed. There was no alarm clock. She woke when the city outside her window began to breathe. She washed her face with cold water, tied her faded scarf, and prepared the little cart that had been her life for many years. The cart was old, made of wood and metal, with one wheel that always squeaked. On it, she sold simple food. Nothing fancy, just warm meals made with care. People liked her food because it tasted like home, even if they did not know why. By the time the sky turned pale, she pushed the cart to her usual spot near a busy road. Cars rushed past. Buses stopped and started. People walked fast, eyes on their phones or the ground. Very few looked at her face. She did not mind. She was used to being invisible. Her hands moved from memory. She cooked, served, and smiled softly. Some days were good. Some days were not. On bad days, she counted her coins again and again, hoping they would somehow increase. Still, she never complained. Life had already taken much from her, and complaining never brought anything back. As the sun climbed higher, the city grew louder. That was when she noticed them. At first, she thought she was seeing the same child 3 times. They were sitting close together near an empty shop, thin arms wrapped around their knees. Their clothes were too big and too dirty. Their shoes were broken, barely holding on. They looked no older than 10. They did not beg. They did not shout. They just watched people pass, their eyes quiet but tired. She felt something tighten in her chest. She had seen hungry people before. Hunger had lived with her for many years. But there was something about these 3 that stayed with her. Maybe it was the way they leaned into each other, like one body with 3 hearts. Or maybe it was the way they tried to look brave while clearly afraid. Customers came and went. She served them, but her eyes kept drifting back to the children. They did not move much. When one stood up, the other 2 stood as well. When one sat, they all sat. She realized then that they were brothers. Around midday, when the heat became heavy, the woman made a decision without thinking too much. Thinking too much often led to fear. She prepared 3 small plates of food, adding a little extra to each. It meant she would earn less that day, but her hands did not shake. She walked slowly toward them, pushing the cart a little closer. The boys noticed her and became tense. One stepped in front of the others, as if trying to protect them. His eyes were sharp, even though his body was thin. The woman stopped a short distance away, so she would not scare them. "Eat," she said gently, placing the plates on a low step near them. "It's hot. Food should not go to waste." They stared at the plates like they were not real. "You don't have to pay," she added quickly. "I made too much." The boys looked at each other. They did not rush forward. Hunger had taught them to be careful. Finally, the smallest one reached out and touched the plate, as if checking whether it would disappear. When it did not, they slowly sat down. They ate quietly. No talking, no fighting, just careful bites, like they were afraid someone would take the food away. The woman stood nearby, pretending to arrange her cart, but really she was watching. She noticed how one boy always made sure the other 2 had enough. She noticed how they shared even the smallest pieces. When they finished, they pushed the plates back toward her, clean and shining. "Thank you," one of them said, his voice barely louder than the traffic. She nodded. "Come again tomorrow if you're hungry." She did not ask where they lived. She did not ask where their parents were. Some questions carried pain, and she had learned to respect that. The next day they returned, and the next. Soon it became a quiet routine. She fed them once a day, sometimes twice if business was good. She talked to them about small things, the weather, the food, which buses were the loudest. They did not talk much about themselves, but she learned enough. They had been on the streets for a long time. They slept wherever they could. They stayed together because being apart was too dangerous. She never told them her own story, not because it was secret, but because it did not matter. What mattered was that they were alive today. Some customers noticed the boys and frowned. A few warned her that helping them would bring trouble. She smiled politely and kept serving food. Trouble had already visited her many times in life. It had not broken her yet. One afternoon, a man complained loudly that the boys were scaring customers away. The woman listened quietly, then handed the man his change and said, "Hunger scares children more than children scare adults." The man left without another word. At night, when she returned to her room, her body ached more than usual, but her heart felt lighter. She lay on her thin mattress and thought about the boys. She wondered if they were warm enough. She wondered if they were safe. She whispered a short prayer, not asking for money or comfort, but for their protection. Days turned into weeks. The boys grew more relaxed around her. Sometimes they smiled. Sometimes they laughed softly when she made small jokes. On very good days, she packed extra food for them to take away. She told herself she was only doing what anyone should do. But deep inside, she felt something else growing, a feeling she thought she had lost long ago. Purpose. She did not know that people were watching. A shopkeeper across the road noticed how the boys always waited for her. A bus driver saw how she saved food for them even when her cart was almost empty. Life was quietly recording everything. One evening, the boys did not show up. She waited longer than usual, her hands resting on the cart. The sun went down. The streetlights came on. Still, they did not come. Fear crept into her chest. She packed her things slowly, her movements heavy. That night, sleep did not come easily. She did not know that this was only the beginning, that a small act done without witnesses was about to become a story far bigger than her little cart, bigger than hunger, bigger than time. For now, she was just an old woman who fed 3 hungry children, and that was enough. The 3 boys huddled together in a dark corner behind an abandoned shop. The city was loud outside, full of cars, buses, and voices that belonged to people who had homes, food, and families. They were quiet. Their clothes smelled of smoke and rain, and their small stomachs were still empty from the previous night. Hunger was not just a pain in the stomach. It lived in their minds and made every sound sharper, every shadow larger, and every stranger potential danger. They had been alone for a long time. Their parents had disappeared when they were very young, leaving them to fend for themselves. Some nights, they had cried silently until the cold air carried their tears away. They learned quickly that showing weakness could cost them more than comfort. It could cost them safety. And so they kept their heads low, their movements careful, their eyes watchful. When they met the old woman, something unexpected happened. For the first time in months, they felt a flicker of trust. The food she gave them was not just nourishment. It was kindness without conditions. No one had asked for their story. No one had demanded proof. She simply gave. And in that giving, she offered them a piece of hope. Each day, the boys went to her cart. They ate slowly, quietly, and without complaint. They watched her work, noticing the careful way she measured ingredients and the soft smile she carried even when the city treated her like air. They learned that she did not have much, yet she gave what she could. They did not yet know her name, nor did they ask. Names were heavy. They reminded them of what they had lost. Sometimes, after they ate, the oldest boy would ask her questions, simple ones. "Why do you feed us?" She would answer, "Because someone should." They did not understand fully, but they felt it in their hearts. Her presence became a small island in a city that otherwise did not notice them. Despite her care, life on the streets was not easy. Each day brought new dangers. Strangers could be cruel. The nights were cold, and they often went to bed on hard surfaces or damp corners. The city did not stop for children who were alone. They had learned to move quickly, to hide when necessary, and to make themselves small when trouble passed by. The boys shared stories in whispers. They spoke of streets they had wandered, places where people had yelled at them, and nights when they went without a roof. They learned to trust each other more than anyone else, because only together could they survive. Their bond was unspoken but strong. Every decision they made, every small act of courage, was for one another. The old woman noticed this. She would sometimes say, "Take care of each other. That is more important than anything else." And they did. They always made sure no one went hungry before the other. If one found scraps of bread, it was shared. If one found a safe corner to sleep, all three moved there. Their unity was their only protection. One day, a social worker came to the street. She had heard from a passerby about the children and their unusual routine. The boys froze when they saw her. Strangers brought questions, forms, and changes they were not ready to face. Fear gripped them. But the old woman, standing a few steps behind them, placed her hand gently on the oldest boy's shoulder. He nodded slightly. It was the first time in a long time that they allowed themselves to be led. The social worker took careful notes, asked questions, and explained that they could provide food, shelter, and safety. The boys listened quietly. They wanted to help. But they also wanted to stay together, to stay near the woman who had fed them. Their hearts felt torn between trust and fear, hope and loss. After some discussion, arrangements were made for the boys to be taken into temporary care. The old woman walked them to the van that would take them to a safer place. Her hand shook slightly, and her eyes were wet. She did not speak much. She simply watched as the boys climbed inside, small bodies moving together as always. They turned back once, waving, their eyes holding her gaze for a long moment. That night, she returned to her room, feeling a quiet emptiness. Her cart was still, her meals untouched. The city's noise seemed louder than ever, echoing the absence of their small voices. She worried about them. She hoped they were warm, that they had enough, that the world would not be cruel to them. Meanwhile, in their new temporary home, the boys were cautious. The rooms were clean, the beds soft, and the meals plentiful. But the comfort was strange. It did not feel real. They whispered each other at night, sharing small reassurances. "We are still together," one would say, and that was enough to bring a small sense of peace. Though they were away from the streets, they never forgot the woman. They spoke of her often, not to the social workers, but to each other. They remembered her hands, her smile, the warmth of food she prepared. Her simple acts of kindness had created a safety net that they could carry in their hearts. Every bite she gave had been a lesson in trust and care. The boys began to adjust slowly. They attended school programs, learned routines, and met people who wanted to help. But at night, when the world was quiet, they thought of the woman. They wondered if she was cold, if she had eaten, if she remembered them. They wished they could see her again, not just for food, but for the comfort of her presence. Back at her cart, the woman continued her life. She served customers with the same gentle smile, though her heart carried the memory of the boys. Sometimes, when a plate was returned uneaten, she thought of them and imagined them safe. She never asked for recognition. The joy was in knowing she had helped, in seeing 3 small lives touched by a simple act. Weeks passed. The boys wrote letters, but they were too young to send them. They folded scraps of paper, hiding words for the day they could find her again. The city moved on as it always did, but their thoughts remained tied to the woman who had shown them that even in a world that seemed empty, kindness existed. As time went on, the old woman noticed small changes around her cart. People talked about the children she had helped. They did not know their story fully, but they saw that something good had happened. She smiled quietly, never claiming credit. Her purpose was never recognition. It was the act itself, simple and true. One rainy evening, as she covered her cart, she thought of the boys and wondered about the future. Would they remember her? Would they survive? Could a simple meal make a difference in lives so fragile? She did not have answers. She only knew she had done what she could. Little did she know that those small acts of care, given without expectation, would grow into something far larger. Those 3 boys, now safe and learning, would carry her kindness in their hearts. It would shape the choices they made, the people they became, and the life that awaited them beyond the hardships of the streets. The world was quiet outside her room. Rain pattered softly against the tin roof. She closed her eyes, letting the sound remind her that life, even with its struggles, carried moments of hope. And in that hope, she held the boys, unseen but deeply felt, close to her heart, knowing that she had changed their lives in ways she could not yet imagine. Years passed quietly, almost unnoticed in the vast city. The old woman continued her routine, waking early, pushing her cart, and serving food with the same gentle hands and soft smile. Her life remained modest, shaped by simple routines and the knowledge that each day mattered more than the past or the future. She thought of the boys often, especially on nights when the streets were empty and the wind carried memories too sharp to ignore. The triplets grew up in their new lives, each carrying the memory of the woman who had fed them when they were most alone. They were placed in different foster homes for safety reasons, but the bond between them never weakened. Their small hands had clung together through cold nights and hunger, and now, even separated, they whispered each other on letters and secret notes, reminding one another their promise to stay together and survive, no matter what. School was a challenge at first. They were older than most children in their classes and behind in lessons. Teachers noticed their quiet determination, but the boys rarely spoke about their past. They had learned long ago that words could be dangerous, that explaining yourself often brought judgment. But inside, each day was a battle between fear and hope, between the desire to belong and the urge to protect the others. The eldest boy took the role of protector naturally. He woke first every day, checked that the others were dressed and fed, and made sure no detail of their routine was missed. The middle boy was clever, noticing small opportunities, finding ways to make money or gather information. The youngest had a gift for remembering, for holding details in his mind that helped them navigate their complex new lives. Together, they formed a quiet, efficient team, still bonded by the lessons of survival taught by the streets and the kindness of one woman. Meanwhile, the old woman's life continued in its slow rhythm. Her cart showed more wear, her hands more lines. Yet, each morning she prepared meals as if the world depended on it. She did not know where the boys were, nor did she expect to. In her mind, she had done her duty, fed them when they were hungry, given them warmth when they were cold, shown them that kindness existed. That was enough for her. But life has a way of stretching threads across years, connecting people in ways unseen. The triplets, now teenagers, began to talk more about the woman. They remembered her words, her touch, the way she moved quietly but with purpose. She had given them more than food. She had given them trust, dignity, and a model for how to treat others. Every choice they made, from schoolwork to small acts of care for strangers, was influenced by her example. They started working small jobs to save money, not for luxuries, but for security, for freedom. They did not want to rely on others. They wanted to create lives where hunger, fear, and helplessness were no longer part of their world. But in their quiet moments, when the noise of the city faded, they thought of the woman and wished they could find her, to let her know that her small acts had changed their lives. Life was not easy. Challenges came at every turn. Bullies in school, difficult teachers, strict foster families. Each challenge tested their resolve. Yet, every time they felt fear creeping in, they remembered her smile, her gentle voice, and the simple fact that someone had cared for them when no one else would. It became a shield and a compass, guiding them forward. The woman, in her own life, continued to experience struggles of a different kind. Health issues crept in quietly. Her legs ached more, her back stiffened. The coin she earned barely covered her rent, and she often went without to make sure her cart was stocked. Yet, she never complained. Complaining, she thought, was a luxury she could not afford. Survival required patience, resilience, and quiet hope. Some nights, she would dream of the boys. Faces she had seen only as small children appeared in her sleep as young men. She wondered if they were safe, if they had enough to eat, if life had been kinder to them than the streets had been. She would wake before dawn, resolve in her heart that if she could, she would continue to prepare her meals with care, just in case fate brought them back to her. The boys, as they grew older, started learning more than survival. They learned about money, business, and responsibility. Each of them found a path that suited their skills. The eldest focused on organization, the middle on creativity and problem solving, the youngest on strategy and detail. Even in separate homes, they collaborated secretly, sending each other ideas and small notes, building a shared vision for the future that was entirely theirs. One rainy evening, the eldest boy wrote in his journal, "We survive because of her. Every choice we make, every step forward, is because she gave us hope. We must never forget." The other two agreed silently. Her kindness had become the foundation of their lives. It was a quiet fire burning within them, guiding, warming, and sustaining. The old woman, unaware of all this, continued to prepare her cart each day. Some customers were regulars, familiar faces who smiled and nodded. Others were new, eyes curious but polite. But none of them knew the story behind her hands, the memories she carried, or the boys who had once sat quietly eating her food. Life continued in small gestures, unnoticed by most, but monumental in unseen ways. As the years passed, the boys grew taller, stronger, and wiser. They excelled in their studies and in small jobs, saving money and learning independence. The memory of the woman and the meals she had given them became a moral compass. They began helping others when they could, small acts at first, teaching themselves that kindness was a habit, not a choice. And still, in quiet moments, they spoke of returning to her. They did not yet know how, but they felt a pull, a sense that gratitude demanded action. They imagined the look on her face, the surprise, the joy. They imagined showing her that her small act had created lives that could change the world, starting from the corner of a quiet street. Back at her room, the woman sometimes thought she had done her part and nothing more. She never sought recognition, but her heart carried a quiet warmth, a knowledge that she had given what she could. She never imagined that those 3 small children had grown into young men, carrying forward her lessons in kindness and resilience, preparing for a day when their paths might cross again. Life, in its quiet persistence, moved forward for all of them. The city remained busy, the streets full of people, and the seasons continued to change. But underneath the noise, the small acts of years ago were forming the foundation of something extraordinary. The boys, shaped by hunger and care, were building futures that reflected the one simple truth the woman had taught them. Even in the darkest moments, human kindness could change everything. The old woman, standing at her cart one morning, felt a breeze against her face. She did not know that far away the boys were talking about her, plotting how to find her, and preparing to repay a debt of gratitude that had no price. The world around them was unaware, but time, as it always does, was preparing the moment when their paths would cross again. And so, life continued in its quiet, ordinary way, filled with small sacrifices, hidden struggles, and moments of courage. For the woman and the boys, each day was another step forward, another chance to survive, to grow, and to carry the lessons of the past into the unknown future. The memory of a simple meal shared in kindness had become the seed of resilience and hope that would one day bloom into something unforgettable. It was a regular morning for the old woman. She woke with her usual stiffness in her back, the chill of the early city air filling her small room. She dressed slowly, tied her faded scarf, and prepared the cart with the same care she had every day. The streets were already alive with cars, buses, and people rushing to their jobs. She walked to her usual spot, pushing the cart with her familiar rhythm, her mind lost in small thoughts about the day ahead. She had no idea that today was different. The air felt the same, the sounds the same, and yet something invisible was shifting. As she set her cart and arranged the food, a soft hum of engines caught her attention. 3 bright, shiny Lamborghinis pulled up slowly in front of her cart. The people walking by stopped in surprise. Phones appeared as curious onlookers, recorded the strange sight. The old woman blinked and stared, unsure she was imagining things. Luxury cars did not usually stop in front of her corner. Not for her, not for anyone selling simple meals from a small wooden cart. The first car door opened. A tall young man stepped out, dressed neatly, carrying an air of confidence, yet there was something soft in his eyes. Then the second car door opened, and another young man appeared, looking equally striking but calm. The third car followed, and the final young man stepped out, scanning the street, but his eyes found her immediately. They were the Triplets. Time seemed to slow for the old woman. Her hands trembled slightly as she recognized them, not as the small, hungry boys she once fed, but as 3 confident young men, successful, strong, and focused. She could not speak at first, fear and astonishment catching her throat. Her heart pounded, each beat echoing the years of quiet care, sacrifice, and hope she had carried in her own life. The crowd had gathered, whispers running through the people who did not know the story behind the scene. Some were shocked, some curious, some simply amused, but she did not notice them. All that mattered were the three young men standing in front of her, smiling gently, their eyes reflecting recognition and gratitude. The eldest stepped forward, lowering himself slightly in a gesture of respect. "Do you remember us?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a mixture of joy and reverence. The old woman could only nod, tears beginning to form. I fed you years ago," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know what would happen to you." "We remember everything," the youngest said, stepping closer. "You saved us when no one else would. You gave us food, warmth, and hope. You made us believe that people could care." The middle one smiled. "We have looked for you for years. Every success we have had is because of what you did for us. We are here today because of you." The old woman's mind spun. She had never expected anything like this. She had never imagined that 3 small acts of kindness could ripple through time and come back in such a way. Her hand shook as she adjusted her scarf, trying to steady herself. She felt the weight of the years, the struggle, and the quiet hope she had carried suddenly lifted by the sight of the 3 young men. I don't understand," she whispered. "I only fed you when you were hungry. I didn't do anything important." The eldest laughed softly, a sound full of warmth. "You did everything important. You taught us that kindness is not measured by wealth or power, but by heart. You showed us that even small actions can change lives. We owe everything to you." The old woman looked at them, her mind trying to absorb the truth. They were no longer children. They were strong, independent, and thriving. The hunger, the cold, the fear. They had survived it all and carried her kindness with them, shaping the people they had become. They gestured toward the cart. "This is where it all began," the middle one said. "We want to come back here to show you that your small acts created a future you may never have imagined." People around them murmured, taking pictures and recording the scene, but the old woman paid no attention. She could only focus on the 3 young men in front of her, each carrying a piece of her heart she had thought lost to the years. The youngest reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 small envelopes. He handed one to the woman. "This is a token of our gratitude," he said. "It is not charity. It is recognition of the life you saved and the love you gave us without asking anything in return." The old woman opened the envelope carefully. Inside were notes, photographs, and letters describing the journeys they had taken, the struggles they had overcome, and the lives they were building. Tears ran down her cheeks as she read their words, understanding for the first time how deeply her actions had affected them. She looked up at them, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "I never expected anything. I only did what I could in the moment. I did not know it would grow like this." The eldest shook his head. "It grew because you gave without expecting. That is the secret. The world needs more people like you." For a moment, the city, the cars, the people all faded. It was just the 4 of them, connected by time, kindness, and shared memories. The old woman's heart, heavy with years of quiet struggle, felt light. She realized that her small acts had not been invisible. They had taken root in lives she had once only touched briefly, and now flourished in ways she had never imagined. The triplets insisted she sit with them while they served her a warm meal from their own prepared basket. For the first time in years, she ate without worry, without counting coins, without thinking of tomorrow. She laughed softly at small jokes they made, smiled at stories of their adventures, and listened to their plans for the future. Each word, each gesture, was a reflection of the care she had once given them. They told her about their work, how they had grown businesses, learned skills, and saved carefully. Yet, through all their achievements, they never forgot the woman who had taught them humanity before money, kindness before power. She listened, amazed at their growth, and felt pride not for herself, but for the lives she had touched. The crowd around them began to disperse slowly. Some took photos discreetly. Others whispered about the unlikely reunion. But for the old woman, none of it mattered. All that mattered were the young men who had returned 1,000-fold the care she had once given without thought. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. The old woman realized that life had brought a reward she could never have imagined. It was not wealth, fame, or recognition. It was the proof that small acts of goodness could echo across time, shaping lives in ways invisible yet powerful. As the triplets prepared to leave, they promised to remain close, to visit, and to make sure the woman would never struggle again. They had found success, yes, but they had also found responsibility, to care for the one who had cared for them when no one else did. The old woman watched them go, tears falling freely. She returned to her cart, now lighter, warmer, and more at peace than she had felt in years. The city noise was still there. The wind still carried dust and voices. But her heart was calm. The ripple of her kindness had become a wave, returning to her in the most beautiful, human way. That day, she understood something profound. She had lived a life of quiet sacrifice, believing her deeds were small, unseen. Yet in the end, the world had spoken back through 3 lives, showing her that the smallest act, given with full heart, could create something extraordinary. She smiled, a smile that carried years of love, loss, hope, and now, the joy of reunion. The days that followed the reunion were different for the old woman. Her life, once filled with quiet struggles and small routines, now carried a lightness she had not felt in years. She continued to push her cart, to serve meals, to smile at the regular customers, but there was a warmth in her chest that no hardship could touch. She had seen the fruit of her kindness, felt the power of her small acts, and it changed her forever. The triplets did not disappear after that day. They visited often, sometimes bringing gifts, sometimes just stopping to talk. They insisted on helping her with her cart, buying fresh ingredients, and making sure she never worked harder than she needed. Their presence alone made her heart feel full. The city no longer seemed so cold or indifferent when they were nearby. One morning, the eldest arrived with a key in his hand. "We've arranged a place for you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's small but warm, safe, and yours. You will not need to worry about rent, food, or cold nights again." The old woman felt tears fill her eyes. She tried to speak, but the words refused to come. She had never asked for anything, never expected anything. And yet here they were, offering her comfort, dignity, and security simply because she had cared for them once. She realized then that kindness, even when it seemed small, has a way of returning multiplied beyond measure. The new home was modest but comfortable. The walls were clean, the bed was soft, and the kitchen was stocked with everything she could need. The windows let in sunlight that warmed her room in the morning. She walked through it slowly, touching the surfaces, breathing the new air, and feeling the difference between mere survival and life lived with care. She had never thought such a life could be hers. The triplets insisted on staying nearby, making sure she settled in. They brought meals to the table, helped with small chores, and sat with her in the evenings, sharing stories and laughter. For the first time in decades, she felt truly seen and appreciated, not just as a helper, not just as someone who served food, but as a person whose presence mattered deeply. They shared their own journeys with her, telling her about the struggles they had faced after leaving the streets, how they had saved every bit of money they could, learned new skills, and built businesses from nothing. They had done all of this to honor her kindness, to repay it in the only way they knew how. The woman listened, astonished, humbled, and full of quiet pride. She had never imagined that her simple act of feeding 3 hungry children could have shaped such lives. With their support, she no longer had to worry about the little things that had once consumed her days. She spent her mornings preparing meals for those who could not afford them, teaching small children and young adults the same lessons she had once shared quietly with the triplets. She understood now that her role had expanded. She was not just feeding bodies. She was feeding hope, teaching resilience, and planting seeds of care that could grow in anyone who crossed her path. The triplets watched her work, proud and reverent. They saw her teach the younger ones, her patience, her kindness, and her unwavering belief in the goodness of people. They recognized in her actions the same lessons they carried in their hearts all those years, that even the smallest act of care could have a life-changing impact, that compassion was a strength, and that every gesture mattered. The old woman no longer felt alone. She had friends, support, and a connection that went beyond gratitude. She had 3 sons in spirit, the triplets who had returned her kindness 1,000 times over, and a community that began to form around her cart and her home. People who once passed by without notice now stopped to say hello, to learn from her, to share stories of their own struggles. Her world had expanded quietly, naturally, and beautifully. Time passed, and the bond between them grew stronger. They celebrated birthdays together, small victories, and even the quiet, ordinary days. The woman, who had once measured life in the coin she could earn and the meals she could prepare, now measured it in laughter, connection, and the knowledge that her life had meaning far beyond what she had imagined. She often thought back to the first day she fed the boys, wondering what would have happened if she had walked past that corner without noticing them. She realized that every small decision, every simple act of care, had consequences she could never predict. That day, that moment, had set off a chain of events that reshaped not only her life, but the lives of 3 young men who had grown into extraordinary people. The triplets, successful now and carrying the lessons of her kindness, began giving back to the community in ways she had inspired. They established small programs to feed the hungry, provide shelter for children in need, and support families struggling to survive. They shared the story of the woman who had fed them when no one else would, ensuring that her lesson lived on in the lives of many more. The old woman, though still modest and humble, became a quiet figure of inspiration. Her cart was no longer just a place for meals. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of human kindness. People came not only for food, but for guidance, for wisdom, and for the reminder that one act, given sincerely, could change lives. Even in her final years, she felt fulfilled. She had lived a life of quiet perseverance, shaped by struggle and small joys, and she had witnessed the extraordinary power of kindness. The triplets never left her side, ensuring she was cared for, loved, and remembered. Their lives, shaped by her compassion, were proof that goodness has a way of returning, sometimes in ways unimaginable, sometimes multiplied beyond expectation. One evening, as the sun set and painted the city in gold, the old woman sat outside her new home, the triplets beside her. They laughed softly, sharing stories from their youth, marveling at how far they had come. She felt the warmth of connection, the comfort of being seen, and the deep, quiet peace that comes from knowing that a life well lived is a life that has made a difference. She understood that every hardship, every lonely night, and every struggle had led her to this moment. And in that understanding, she smiled, a smile full of gratitude, love, and quiet triumph. Her life, once small and hidden, had touched others in ways she had never imagined. Her kindness had returned to her 1,000 times, filling her days with joy, comfort, and the certainty that even the smallest act of love can echo across lifetimes.